Well, if you have any things on your desk, phones, laptops, desktops, remove them, please. Any questions about anything? Clear? You have weekly questions that revolves around perhaps some of the things you've talked about in class and the audios and the video. But then you have one long essay revolving around the 3 items on the canvas. So the 2 audios and the 1 video. That's once every month.
The 3 videos is not the assignment, but
yeah, anything. The question can be anything that involves those 3. You don't have to watch or you don't have to listen to all of them. Just whatever piques your interest. If it inspires any questions, just write it down. Yeah.
Maybe I'm not savvy enough, but I couldn't find a link to a video.
Yeah?
Well, I couldn't. Maybe it's there, but I couldn't.
I'll go and check. Maybe it's from my end. Yeah.
We're allowed to ask you a question for the question of the week, right?
I guess so, yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Because I did that.
Yeah. Anyone else? So what do you guys want to talk about today? Let's do something fun. Hilia? Sure.
so my sister,
Allahu Akbar.
no,
Is it like one of those Dr. Phil or Oprah Winfrey questions?
maybe,
Okay.
but she said she's like you asked, please. So she's in a toxic relationship, but she wants to stay.
She what?
She's in a toxic relationship, but she wants to stay.
Okay. Let her stay.
Want to get better.
She wants to get better?
Yeah.
Why?
You say that one more time.
Yeah, record it. What's her name? Nefertiti? Stay in the relationship. Be fully infected with the poison. And when you're completely sick, you will leave. There you go. Anyone else? You know, I have all these clothes that I no longer wear. They fit me. I just no longer wear them. I used to give them to students. They used to come to the house, you know, have some food, we would sit and have conversation. I would say, well, this jacket fits you, the shoes fit you. Sometimes I will take them, sometimes not. But I will always give things away that had no sentimental value for me. That, for example, I would look at a jacket and then picture myself 10 years in the future and say, yeah, I would wear that. Then I would just keep it. When you talk about relationships, you need to understand that not only do you physically become attached to someone, but in the course of the physical attachment, you create stories, psychological stories. You go to in and out together, you hold hands together, you have sex together, you watch movies together. And so there is a good amount of addiction that takes place in every relationship, regardless of how abusive it may be. And then leaving it is going to be difficult. Not so much physically. I mean, right now I'm here. My wife is physically we are, apart. But just in case she dies, or I die, or something happens, Well, when I go home, when I look at the kitchen, when I look at the bedrooms, when I go to the book room, all I'm going to see is her. I want her, but she won't be there physically. And because emotionally and psychologically and historically I'm attached, moving on is going to be very difficult. Dating is going to be difficult. And the other thing is, some people just enjoy being abused. If you don't believe me on that, live life. Live in society. Society abuses you on a daily basis. Look at this class and all the other classes you have to take. Look at your job. They're all toxic. But what are you going to do? You can drop the class, and then what? The abuse you will suffer from this class is actually good for you. It'll get you a grade, some units, and you will find yourself at Yale, Stanford, San Francisco. If on the other hand, you're involved in an abusive romantic relationship, you will need therapy afterwards. Anyone else? Mark? Yeah.
I got a message saying that the first assignment was graded.
First question.
So was it Sunday?
You have questions every Sunday. Do.
Last Wednesday, I asked you what the assignment was.
Well, the assignment has to do with all the three components on Canvas. That's once every month, but you have weekly questions. And you have a week to come up with a question and then post them on Canvas. Due Sunday before 11:59 p.m. If you've missed it, just come up with a question and submit it. It's okay. Yeah.
Got a question. You think you can ever get over someone you love?
I'm sorry?
You think you can ever get over someone you love romantically and like move on and love someone else as equally as your first love?
Can you move on your first
So like
romantic?
if you love someone romantically, can you move on? Like if you divorce or you drift apart, you now go love a different partner as equally or more?
Okay. So I think, and I'm not completely sure about this, even though I've been in like 8 or 9 marriages, the way things work is that you pick up a book because the cover looks interesting, the title of the book looks interesting, the color of the cover looks interesting. You read the bibliography, say, interesting, table of contents, interesting. So you begin to read the book. Introduction, and then the first chapter, second, third, fourth. But then as perhaps you continue to read, maybe life gets in the way, or maybe you lose interest. But the book is interesting enough to occupy a certain space in your mind. So throughout the day, once in a while, for 5-10 minutes, you think about the chapters you've read. How is it going to end? It's like, this Harry Potter movie is going to come out, The Curse of the Evil Child or something. And if you like the Harry Potter series, if you watch the movies, if you read the books, once in a while you say, I wonder how this upcoming movie is going to be. Who's going to be in it? What's the narrative? How are things going to unfold? So it occupies a certain space. The movie ends, let's just say. The movie comes out, or maybe it satisfies you, or maybe it leaves certain parts of you discontent, unhappy, because you were thinking about the movie going this way, but it went a complete other way. I guess the point I'm trying to make is this. As long as there is no closure, let's say you ask a question, and I answer it, but don't really answer it. And then you raise your hand again and say, I'm sorry, I didn't really get the answer. And then we try again. And then you say, I'm sorry, I know you tried, but I don't mean to pest you, but I didn't get it. And we do it again and again and again until you either give up, that becomes your closure, that this guy's an idiot, he's never going to answer my question, or luckily, magically, I answer your question, and then you're satisfied. In satisfaction comes closure. Then you walk away. Now, people have different timetables. Some people get over a divorce or a relationship, any kind of relationship. It doesn't need to be romantic. Let's say you come to this class an entire 16 weeks and you were hoping to get an A, but you end up with a C or a D. Well, you're not simply going to walk away saying, I accept my grade. You're going to look at 16 weeks and you say, man, it's been a complete waste. The guy was not so much fun. I did all the work. I don't deserve this. So the blame game begins. I am great. He sucks as an instructor. I should complain. And then you realize, well, things are not going your way, really. Then anger comes up. And in anger, there is a sense of injustice, that you've been wronged. And your anger is supposed to right the wrong. And you try to play all these games, sometimes successful, sometimes not. Okay? And then the anger goes away because you're sitting and writing your applications for Stanford, for San Francisco, whatever the case may be. And then it says you need to have all of your classes at least the grade C. You try to reach out to me, but I'm dead. You contact my dean and he says, I'm sorry, this is what it is. Can't help you. This is where he's buried. Maybe you can go speak to the gravestone, tombstone, and maybe he'll resurrect from the dead and he'll change your grade. Okay? And then you get depressed. You applied to San Francisco. Because of this particular class, because of this particular grade, you may not be accepted. And then you have this internal battle going on. You fight with yourself, you fight with administrators, all that stuff. And then there comes a point where you say, you know what? I'm just going to be at Laney another semester, retake the class. But you have to go through all those steps to finally come to this place of closure. You sacrifice a semester, you go through all these emotional ups and downs, and then you say, okay, I'm fine with it. So when you talk about romantic relationships, the first thing you need to understand about how relationships come about. If you really, if you don't want to approach it superficially, you ask yourself, how do relationships come about? Well, do you plan for it? Imagine you have a plot of land and you want to build a house. What are you going to do? Are you an architect? No, of course not. So what do? You go hire some people. They look at the land. They look at the slope. They look at the sewer lines. They look at the electric lines. They have to consider all those things before erecting this place, right? Now, you don't do that when you get into a relationship, do you? How about when you buy a car? Do you just close your eyes, give your money to someone, and just buy a car? Of course not. We put a good amount of reflection, thought process, in wanting to buy a car, something that involves a good amount of money that you have saved. You work every day for about 5 years, you save a lot of money, right? You sacrifice your belly by not going to In-N-Out, by not going to Barney's, by not going to Zachary's. You save your money because you want to buy a car, a dependable car. And then you have about $10,000 in your pocket. And what you do is now you go on Amazon, you go on CarMax, you go to various car dealerships, and you test drive. You test drive. How does it feel on your back? How does it feel on your ass? How does it drive? Is it comfortable? How does it function on the bumps? Okay? Now, when it comes to romantic relationships, the story is very, very different. Here you are, lonely, pathetic, an American, by default, because of the current culture, you have no choice but to be alone and depressed, and lonely and sad. You have lots of useless friends. They say if you're having a party, come over. You do go over. And you look over there, and there she is. Let's just say you're a hetero. So what do? Well, you go towards this woman. Somehow you say, okay, should I go now? Should I go 10 minutes from now? Do I smell good? Does she smell good? All that stuff. You go there. And pleasure kicks in. And the more you talk, the more you like. The more you like, the more spend time. The more you spend time, the more stories you create. The more stories you create, your love intensifies. Your like intensifies. Now you go home thinking about this person. Why, did you hire an architect about this? Did you consult your parents, an elder of sorts? Your brother perhaps has gone through 50 marriages? Of course not. You trust yourself, right? Are you proficient in the art of thinking, reflecting? No. Do you have any tools? No. All you have are 5 crummy senses who tells you, oh, she's attractive, go out there. And you ask some stupid, ridiculous, cheesy questions, and she answers you, but you don't really care about the questions you ask. You don't really care about the responses you get. You just want to be next to her. And then you guys have sex. And that even intensifies the situation. Then you love. Do you examine what time does to any relationship? Of course not. You don't care about those things. So time passes. And as time passes, you get to know her. And as you get to know her more, you realize you don't really like her as much. In fact, you don't even like yourself as much. You're an 18-year-old punk. You're no place to be in a serious relationship. You want to move on. You want to do other things. Initially, it was fun, but no longer. Or maybe that's how she feels about you. You love her, and the thing about romantic relationships is that people love in different ways. In a romantic relationship, one person always loves more. And the person who loves less has more power over you. If you and I are dating, and you love me a lot, and I don't love you as much, it's not going to be difficult for me to leave. You can blame me. You can make me feel guilty, ashamed. Doesn't really matter. I don't really love you as much. You, on the other hand, because you love more than I, you'll be stuck. You will need therapy. I won't. I'll just continue dating. You will need drugs. You will need porn. You will need something to satisfy your depression, your sadness, your loneliness. I, on the other hand, because I have power. And I have power because I don't love you as much. Now, if you don't get closure in the right way, what you'll be is jaded. You will always want to be in relationships, but you will have lost a bit of your faith, a bit of your trust, a bit of your decency. You will take one step forward and 10 steps back. And you're always going to be looking for a way out. That's how things are. See, you can get closure in two ways. You can either forget or you can understand. Forgetting is not very difficult. Give it some time, you'll forget. Understanding, it's an enormous task because you have to sit and examine a whole host of things. Now, imagine I'm your brother and you and I have been in relationships with different people. You break up, I break up, or they break up with us. You heal after 2 weeks, I'm stuck. Why? Well, temperamentally, you're an extrovert. Maybe I'm an introvert. I become easily attached, but not you. So different people have different timetables. If you don't understand that, what happens is you're going to look at me and you're going to feel envy. But why is he healed so quickly? Then you'll be angry. And then you think like I have this magical book in my hand that I've read and all of a sudden I've gone through healing. No. Everything about us is complicated, everything. Anyone else about anything that's worth talking about? Yeah, Q.
What advice would you give
What?
21-year-old? What advice would you give 21-year-old? Talk to yourself.
The problem with me giving you an advice, first of all, is I'm an immigrant. And I'm also an immigrant who suffered homelessness for a while. We couldn't get any money. We had to get food from the church in Davis. The other advantage that I have is I'm 60. So I've gone through a whole different kind of stages and steps in life. I also remember my own parents sitting me down and giving me advice, sending me to India so that I could become a better student, sending me to America so I could become a better student. None of those things happened because we don't receive advice well. Okay. But all that aside, perhaps the most important thing that I can share with you is stay in school. You don't need to like me. You don't need to like Laney College. You don't need to like the facilities. This is a stepping stone that you need to cross. Take the classes because, trust me, you're going to see some people in this room who are over the age of 25, 30. And if they have any regret, it's about not being in school. Graduate from high school at the age of 18. Had they been in school, they would have been done with this whole thing by the time they were 25, 26. Now, you could be a musician, an artist, very talented, but the competition is fierce out there. I used to have lots of athletes in my classes, football players. And every time you ask them, so how's your future going to look like? Oh, Raiders is going to pick me. 49ers is going to pick me. None of those things happened. Only a couple of my students made it to big times. The rest, I have no idea what they're doing. Okay? You can be an artist, but always have a backup plan. America is a very, very vicious culture. Your parents have their own issues. They're not going to support you financially, and if they do, it's only short term. Life in America is profoundly expensive. And one of the security blankets you have is school. Again, don't like it. And if you want to major in creative arts, like, I don't know, music, social sciences, always have a minor. Do computer science, do accounting, do business, just in case history doesn't work out for you, just in case psychology doesn't work out for you, computer science will make you some money. I mean, I have a nephew. He got this crummy computer science degree from Berkeley. He works in New York now, making $300,000 a year. How old is he? 22. Does he deserve it? No. But that's what the culture is. Stay in school. Don't like it, stay in school. Be political. Understand the culture in which you live. Yeah.
What you're saying is basically be practical,
Yeah.
understandable.
Yeah. Don't be a hippie. Yeah.
Ideas can only get you so far.
Yeah. Anyone else? Kendra? Who? So advertisement of any kind is a form of propaganda. Imagine you go to a church and Malcolm X walks to the podium. What is he doing? He's advertising ideas. Why? So it can change the way you think. It can inspire certain feelings. So when you leave the church, you can think differently. You can feel differently. You can look at society differently. You can think about justice differently. Everything in life is about advertisement. So you're born, you got no father. That's an advertisement right there. And your mom keeps whispering in your ears, men are not to be trusted. What is that going to do? They did this experiment on people. I don't know what Super Bowl it was, and you probably know it because you've been in my other classes. That they advertised during halftime of Super Bowl, no more than a second, less than a second really, the logo of Pepsi-Cola. And you got half hour of free time, so lots of people got in their car, went to 7-Eleven, Safeway, and got themselves lots of, Pepsis. Now, while driving to Safeway and getting Pepsi, they assumed that I'm doing this because I'm independent. I have free will. My desires are my own creation, right? And the sale of Pepsi-Cola went up by 600% in 20 minutes. All of life is about advertisements. So next time you go somewhere, you want to buy something, you want to listen to something, you want to say anything about anything, ask yourself what sort of advertisement has been exposed to you. Everything is a piece of advertisement that lives inside you. Everything. I mean, consider one of the best stories you will ever encounter is the story of Malcolm X. And I talk about Malcolm X because he is a current prophet. That you can see the transition, right? You have a guy who has been advertised what it means to be African American in America. And then you have the same guy in the prison system who is now being exposed to a different set of advertisements. This is what it means to be African American. You like to Color your hair orange or yellow, keep it natural because of A, B, C, D. And what you realize is that, well, different kinds of advertisement creates different kinds of people. And so if you don't like who you are, if you don't like the way you feel, if you don't like the way you think, you have to put yourself in a situation or a physical circumstance or space that contains a different set of advertisements. Now, the problem with new advertisement is the following. Let's say, going back to her question about her sister, she went somewhere, she met a guy, he's like a face on a billboard. She keeps looking at this guy, and eventually she grows to like him. Now, as life happens, life gives her a different set of advertisements. He's not as dependable. That's an advertisement. He's not as smart. He's a little stupid. He's immature. These are advertisements. And what these advertisements are doing is they're telling you in a very, very subtle way, change the direction of your life. Dump him. Be alone. Be single. Perhaps go back to school. Date other people. The problem with this new set of advertisement is that it has to compete with an old set of advertisement. You've been with this person for 5 years. Now you're getting this brand new set of advertisement. Leave. Well, this new piece of advertisement is not going to compete with the old one. The old one is far too powerful. It's like you buy a 1 gallon redwood, you plant it, versus a redwood that's been in the ground for about 5 years. Well, it's more difficult to get rid of the one that's been in the ground for about 5 years. She's been with this person for 5 years, and even if she has, or she's been given a new set of advertisement, there's a good chance she's not going to follow them. It's tough. So, if I was to give you a different example, I would say the following. If you look at the 3rd century all the way to about the 13th century, maybe 14th century, you have really one organization who bombards people with advertisement, and that's the Roman Catholic Church. Every single advertisement that is imposed on the public has to do with religion. Every single one of them. People can't read, so you have glasses that has the picture of Jesus Christ. You have doors that tells the story of Genesis. And so when you go home, you know that, well, you can't have an affair, for example. You can't cheat, you can't lie, you can't do this, you can't do that. And that's the sort of advertisement. And that particular kind of advertisement, well, keeps society cohesive. Everybody thinks the same, speaks the same, feels the same. So without advertisement, you won't survive. It's impossible. I mean, I'm looking forward to the next movie Al Pacino comes up with. He's a piece of advertisement, and I like the way he makes me feel when he screams and shouts and becomes animated. Anyone else? Yeah.
Okay, so coming from a different culture, what was like your initial? How do you feel when you first got to America? What was the culture like you?
Well, when you speak about my culture, you need to understand it's a 4,000-year history. Let me turn the tables around a little and ask you a question. Have you ever been to Folsom? It's a place I used to teach a long time ago, Folsom Lake College. Or maybe Sierra College, that's probably better. When I was there, this is in 2000, The school had about 19,000 students. I think we had maybe 2 African Americans in the entire school. I was maybe one of the 10 faculty members, a person of color. Imagine that you're going to drop Laney and you're going to attend Sierra College. How is it going to make you feel when you walk into the classroom and you look around and you're the only person, let's just say, who happens to be African American or a person of color? How's that going to make you feel? Isolated. Why? Because you have a certain culture. That culture has a certain narrative to it. And when you inject that narrative into that physical space, you realize it doesn't work. Apples and oranges. Okay? So, I had come from a culture that had been exploited, beaten down and beaten up by a variety of different powers over the past 4,000 years. The latest power to exploit and brutalize the country and the people was America. Okay? So the concept was the blue-eyed devil, no different than what Malcolm has suggested some years ago. Okay? So I had come to the country with a good amount of bias. Okay. But it took a long, long time for me to realize this is perhaps one of the best countries you could ever be in. You go to India, you go to Europe, Iran, various parts of the Arab world, America is great. It really, really is. The opportunities it affords you, the things you can accomplish. I mean, there's a reason why everybody comes here, you know. But one of the things you need to understand about immigrants is that immigrants come to America, but they hang on to their own culture, protect it really, really well. I mean, just look at Chinatown here. You can't go up there and open shop. It won't work. If you go to France, they protect their language. It's important to them. So, like anything else, it takes some adjusting, but eventually it'll work. Yeah, Quinn?
Well, I was kind of thinking, you say like America's very depressed. What would it take to be that less?
Less?
Less people that feel that way.
So, a couple of things. Around the 15th century, something very interesting happened. Because almost every question that people ask in any of my classes, there's a history to it. And if you don't know the history, then the answer is not going to work too well. In other words, if you want to have a relationship with me that's going to last 10, 15, 20 years, you need to get to know my history. Because if I'm in a constant battle with my parents, with my siblings, with my boss, with my coworkers, there's a good chance I am just addicted to conflict. And if you don't know that history, what's going to happen is that you're going to invest a good amount of time, energy, emotions into this relationship, and eventually I will abuse you. So getting to know the history is extremely important. America all of a sudden didn't happen this way. It took about 600-700 years for people to become isolated, to feel lonely, to get depressed. You know, it's like saying you don't like your father, hypothetically speaking. Well, it's not like you were born and said, my father, yuck, okay? You cried, instead of him coming to you, holding you, kissing you, he screams, shut the hell up, okay? Then he screams some more, then he kind of smacks you on the head. Little by little, things add up. It snowballs. And by the time you're like 3, you don't want to be around this guy. But there is a history, a 3-year history, okay? Now, Around the 15th century came a guy named Martin Luther. Martin Luther was a Christian, but he didn't like what the Catholic Church was doing. You know, he believed that if your soul needs to be saved, God is the only person who can do it, not the church. Jesus is the only person who can do it, no one else. And you can't give money to buy paradise. It doesn't work. Okay? And now you have two organizations in Europe. You have the Roman Catholic Church, and now you have the Protestants. Now, one of the things about Protestants is the following. You don't need the church. You can sit in your room, you can read the Bible, and you can feel as if Jesus can come down and save you. You don't need anyone else. You don't need the Pope. You don't need clergy. And later on, a sociologist by the name of Emil Durkheim, began to examine the number of suicides of people who are Catholics and people who are Protestants. And he realized that those who favor the tradition of Martin Luther suicide themselves in far greater numbers than Catholics. Why? Well, what does it mean for a Catholic to be a Catholic? Well, you go to church every Sunday, you congregate, you break bread with your companions, with your friends, with those in the church. You don't feel alone, you don't feel isolated. And we're also talking about a time where capitalism is not in full play, okay? And little by little, cracks begin to appear in the way we look at life, we look at ourselves, we look at religion, identity, all that stuff. And then around the 18th century, something amazing happens. 17th, 18th century. You no longer live in a tiny village where everybody knows everyone. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie, White Men Can't Jump. Well, one of the nice things about the movie is that the guy goes into the shop with a gun and says, "Give me all your money." And the owner says, "John, is that you? I'll buy your gun. Remove the mask." And one of the nice things about tiny villages or towns is that everybody knows everybody. You can't steal. They know your name. They know your parents. And if you ever do anything wrong, it'll reach the ears of your dad and your mom, and they'll slap the hell out of you. Okay? As the cities grow bigger, what happens is, well, now you live in a place like New York. And New York does something to your life that, say, a tiny village won't. In a tiny village, like whenever you go on vacation, time moves very, very slow. It's like you keep looking at your clock, your watch, it's only 5 minutes past. Then you look again, 10 minutes past. And there's a story about Jay Leno when he was doing his late nights, that his wife had begged him to go to Hawaii, and so he goes there with his wife, with his kids, and they're only there for no more than maybe, I don't know, a couple of hours. They're on the beach. The wife is away with the kids at the shopping mall and just sitting there. And there's nothing to do. He keeps looking at his time, thinking that it's hours have passed, only 5 or 10 minutes, right? And then he sends a text to his wife. "I'm going back to Los Angeles. Time is moving really slow here. I can't endure it." Now, in New York, time doesn't slow down. Time speeds. From the moment you wake up to the time you go to bed, it's a rat race. Now, when time speeds, what happens is you can't take anyone out to a coffee shop. You can't sit them down. You can't have a conversation for 5, 6 hours. Everything is rushed. And if you want to know how you create relationships, is you have to waste a time on people. You have to spend time with them. But if you don't have time, then all you have are acquaintances, not friends, not people you know, not people you trust. Okay? Now, as you become lonely in the crowd, and add to it the fact that capitalism does something really, really interesting. Why are you in this class? Well, you're not here because of knowledge. You're not here because of wisdom. You're not here because you want to learn. Because you assume you have all of those already. Add to the fact that you feel like you're an American, that gives you a good amount of power, that you're independent, more power, individual, more power. creative, more power, autonomous, more power, and you already assume that you have the ability to think. So no one can teach you anything. So you come here not to learn, but you come here to get 3 units. Why? Well, because without education, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? You're lonely. But what are you going to do? Figure out why you're lonely? Of course not. That takes time. Time you don't have. So you come to class. You look there, you find someone who's relatively attractive. You ask them out on a date. You're in love after 2 weeks. Everybody is pushed into isolation in an environment where time moves really, really fast. Plus, it happens to be a vulturous form of capitalism where nobody can trust anyone. I've had many students, they would simply want to go to the bathroom, but they take their entire stuff, luggage with them. So why are you taking your backpack? I just need to take it. And when everybody becomes a staunch individual, compassion goes away, forgiveness goes away, vengeance becomes dominant. Not trusting anyone becomes dominant. That's how it is. And now your question is, well, how do you go back in time and fix all of this? Well, it's like saying, well, how do you go back in time and fix my relationship with my father? How do you do it? Once the damage has been done, once the dam is cracked, how do you fix it? First, you can fix it. The only thing is, you can't fix the entirety of America. What you can do is this, and this is like a hypothetical, if you want to do this in a practical way. Find someone in this class, let's just say, who looks friendly, who looks inviting, who looks kind and generous. That is the first step. You have to look out there. Who looks hospitable and generous? Once you have detected who in this class has certain qualities that you enjoy, then you gotta summon up some courage. After class, you stalk them. You say, hey, aren't you in my ethics class? Yeah, what do you want? If they say it that way, you say, oh, nothing, sorry. Okay? If on the other hand, they turn around and say, yes, I am. What do you think about that class? Now you can forge a relationship, a friendship. Okay? So then you take down their number. Then you call them, text them, depending on, of course, likabilities and all those things. Now, every single day you go home alone. Every single day you eat food alone, watch movies alone. But now, because of certain actions that you have taken, now instead of going home and being alone, you go to the park, you go to the estuary, you go to Pete's coffee shop, you go to Zachary's and you sit with your newfound friend. Okay? Now when you go home alone, you compare it with, you have found the friendship. Why the hell would you want to go home alone? You invite them for dinner, even though you just had lunch with them. And then your circle begins to grow. But you can't do that. First, because people are not as inviting. Second, if you drive around town and you look at your neighborhood, you realize most of the people have their blinds closed or shut. That's how things are. You can fix things, but it's nearly impossible. Howard?
How is this about
Specialization? Okay. That's a question? Okay. Let me just focus very quickly on specialization and then move on. Have you heard of Adam Smith? He is, to some extent, the father of, economics. He's also a moral philosopher, or ethical philosopher, but all those things aside, let's say that, where are you from? China? Okay. Let's say you lived in a tiny village in China with your parents. Your father would go out there somewhere. He would look at certain forms of dirt. He would put that dirt in a bucket, bring it home, put some dye in it to give it some color, give it a shape, bake it, bring it out, paint it, and then he would give it to you and say, son, Howard, this is a cup. You can make coffee with it or drink coffee from it. And you sit back and you look at your father and you say, man, he knows what dirt to look for. He knows how to shape a cup. He knows how to shape the handle. He knows how to bake it. He knows for how long. He knows how to take it out. He knows how to paint it and then give it to me. This is a man who knows how to make a cup from beginning to an end. When the cities grew, when capitalism grew, when factories grew, what you have is the following. One person is in charge of bringing in dirt. That's the only thing he knows.
Labor.
Right. Another person is only in charge of making fire. He doesn't know what dirt to look for. Another person only knows how to shape the dirt. Another knows only how to bake what's been shaped. Another knows how to paint. And all of a sudden you realize, well, a cup, to make this in 21st century, you need 20 people just to make this. So if you went to someone who's a painter and said, well, how do you bake a cup? I wouldn't really know. Now, one of the tragedies of education is the following. You can go to school and get your PhD in history without knowing psychology, without knowing philosophy, without knowing economics, without knowing sociology. And the truth is, what is really history? History is nothing but the production of human behavior. And why do people behave in a certain way? That's psychology. Okay? Why do people behave in a certain way? Because of belief systems. That's philosophy. That's religion. And ultimately what happens when you have such individuals walking into groups of people? Well, you have society now. Well, in society, what do you need? You need politics to govern people. And all of a sudden, things become really complicated. You can't just go to the classroom and teach philosophy. Teach history. You have to teach a whole host of things. And one of the functions, again, of capitalism or modern capitalism is make sure that no one is whole, that everyone is broken and fragmented, and they know a little bit. That's all. Yeah, Connor.
Question for you, person. Which revolution were you in?
1979.
That one.
Yeah.
In the Wealth of Nations, it says how to treat your workers well and how to build a good society with capitalism. But it doesn't seem like it's really followed today. Why is that?
A lot of people in this class have difficulties in their romantic relationship. If you want your romantic relationship to last for a long time, never bring it down here. Allow it to live in your head. Read Shakespeare, read Shelley, read Keats, read Wordsworth. They talk about love. Read Dante in a very romantic way. And you can sit and read for days, months, years. The moment you bring anything down here, it gets contaminated. That's how things are. It doesn't matter how good they are. It doesn't have to do with Adam Smith and his ideas. Look at Buddhism. Look at Christianity. Look at Judaism. Look at Islam. The moment they set foot down here, it gets destroyed. First, because language creates division. Language, the very nature of language creates division. Why? If I talk about justice, for example, well, you have a certain definition for it, I have a certain definition, he has a certain definition, and the moment we want to come together and talk about it, what we have is just conflict. And then you have people who come from different backgrounds. That creates another fragmentation or division. So nothing really works down here. Blind obedience is the only way.
Trying to sound like Plato.
But we'll talk about Plato in a few weeks. Anyone else before we go home? Yeah. Jiray.
Why do, in a relationship, why do people cheat instead of leaving their partner if they know what type of emotional outcome that's going to come from it?
Well, first of all, no one cheats openly. In other words, if I'm with you, unless you just happen to be living in a very, very strange environment, where you have an open relationship. I don't know how that works, right? Where you look at your companion and say, oh, Joe, I like you, but I want to be with Jack and Jim and James all at the same time. Okay. So all at the side. So the first thing you need to understand is that, first of all, the culture in which you live imposes certain narratives. There are certain places in Europe where open relationship is the only way to be. In ancient Greece, for example, you have to be married, but you must also have male companions. That's just the way things are. But you can't bring that particular philosophy of life here. It won't work. Because the culture is different, the software is different, the stories are different, okay? So that's the first thing you need to understand about cheating, that no one does it openly. Second, if I was to ask you what it means to be a human being, don't say ridiculous things like, well, God and all that stuff, okay? We are pleasure-seeking animal. Look around this classroom. People are mute, some are asleep. Some have a look of disgust. They're not having fun. No fun, no pleasure. No pleasure means what? Well, I don't want to be here. Now imagine if I was to crack some jokes. If it was open the classroom to a conversation. Everybody just go out there like dogs, attack an idea. Right? Now people would say, now I'm having fun. Okay. So that's the first thing you need to understand. People are pleasure-seeking animals. Now, there are different kinds of pleasures. There are physical pleasures that I will look at you and I say, oh my God, Jireh is such a good-looking man. I'm attracted. There are other people who happen to be a bit more mature. Yes, Jireh is good-looking, but I wonder how he thinks about things. I'm looking for intellectual pleasure. Now, your physical body forces me to walk towards you, but then I will ask you questions, and if intellectually I'm not satisfied, I will walk away. How you see things will either make you more attractive or less attractive. Let's say I sit you down, you're physically attractive, you're intellectually attractive, and then I begin to ask you some difficult questions. How's your father? And now I begin to see some body language that I don't like. Despite the fact that you're physically attractive and intellectually attractive, emotionally you're just ugly. I don't want to be around you. If you happen to be in a very, very, very mature stage, where I don't really much care about your physical body, I don't care how many books you've read, I don't care how you express your ideas, and I don't care how animated you are when you talk about the ideas. I want to know if you have a soul inside you. So people have different things that they're looking for. Okay? Now, granted, spiritual pleasures enormously difficult to find or pursue. First, because we're not the sort of animals who enjoy being around souls. And by soul, I don't really know what that means, but nevertheless, like people like Jesus Christ. The demand is far too much, and it goes against the flow of life. I don't like what he says in one of the Gospels. He who sits next to me sits next to fire. I don't want to sit next to fire. You know, I like warmth, but not too much where I begin to burn. When my skin begins to bubble and sizzle, and then I gotta go to the emergency room, I don't like that. Okay? Now, the other thing about pleasure is the following. Imagine you and I are going out. I'm not thinking about transgressing. I'm not thinking about cheating on you. If you pay it very, very close attention, you will come to realize that for the first 4 weeks, 5 weeks, maybe a year, I'm completely devoted to you. We do everything together. I text you, you text me back. I call you. We do all sorts of things together, right? We're even roommates. But you forget something very, very important. You are not an infinite well of wisdom, creativity, beauty. Eventually, I will look at you and be bored. Eventually, you and I have nothing to talk about. Add to it the fact that life is complicated. I wake up in the morning, I have to go to school. Then I got to go to job. Then I come home, I have to look at you. And then you say, how was your day? Well, how the fuck do you think my day was? Then every relationship has its own set of complexities. We fight, we argue, we have disagreements. And little by little, time creates cracks in the relationship. And I go out there and I see someone. And that someone reminds me of something that I've lost. I grow wings. Once again, I feel pleasure. Now, one of the ways that relationships were kept, held together, despite all the rough edges, was that people believed in religion, in God. Shame. Thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not cheat. That your name actually meant something. That the house in which you grew up, you saw both your mom and your dad. And their marriage lasted. Hello. Add to it this other factor that you need to really, really consider seriously. This is a culture in which people whine all the time. People complain. It's a complaining culture. And what happens when you have a complaining culture? Everybody's unhappy. And what happens when people always express unhappiness? They feel entitled. That they have every right to be happy. Life owes them things. Life doesn't owe you shit. You want this class and you want to be happy in this class, it's not making you happy, drop the goddamn class. If you're really brave that you want pleasure in every facet of your life, your job, are you happy with it? If you're not happy, well, quit. This feeling of entitlement makes everybody unhappy. Relationships are not there to make you happy. They're there because the ancient tradition is very simple. Life is long, life is hard. You need a companion.
We just suffer. Try to find meaning in our suffering.
Sure. Find someone who can be on this journey with you. Cook for you, clean for you. You can take him out for dinner once in a while. But you must also consider that our perspective on sex has also changed. We no longer have sex to procreate. You also don't just have sex to feel intimacy. You want sex, you want it fast, you want it hard, you want it long, you want it short. You have pornography. You have the world of advertisement that reduces everyone to a piece of meat. And once you rewire the human psyche, none of the stuff that you guys want to pursue in life has any meaning anymore. You want a companion, it won't work. Because relationships is a bankrupt business. 70% divorce rate. How is anyone going to survive? Do you know how many billions of dollars we spend on pornography? Do you know what happens when you're addicted to pornography and you're married or you have a companion? How that changes your relationship with your companion? Anyone else before we... Yeah.
If you're no longer satisfied or you become bored with the other person before it gets to that point where you cheat, why don't you just leave?
Well, first, just because you're bored and just because you're unhappy, it doesn't conclude that you want to leave. I mean, look, some of us in this class, you don't want to be here. Why don't you drop? Well, there are things that you consider. You need this class to transfer. You need the grade. You need the units. You've been out of school for a while. You don't want to repeat the same old mistakes just because you don't like something, you're going to walk out. So you suffer a bit. You stay in it. And you pray to God that you don't get caught. But then you do. You know, and then repentance, shame, and all those things come about. You know, it's no different. You may have a job right now. Let's say you work at Home Depot, and they pay you like $20 an hour. Without your manager knowing, you're applying a Neiman Marcus. Is it Neiman Marcus or Neiman Marcus, right? And they pay you $50 an hour. Now that's kind of cheating, but you do it for what? More money, more pay, right? More security to better your future. Cheating is no different than that. Okay. Now, the other aspect of cheating that I think is important to consider is the following. If you go back to Quinn's question about loneliness, look, I have no one in this world. I walk around the lake all by myself. My parents and I don't talk very much. I don't really have very many friends. Not because I don't want to have friends. I do want to have friends. I just don't have time to make friendships. And by chance, I'm walking around the lake and you're walking around the lake as well. And you have a dog, and I have a dog. And our dogs begin to lick each other's butt. And you and I sit and say, oh, ha, 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 ha. And now we have a friendship. I get to know you, get to know me, I like you like me. After 2 weeks, I say, I love you. And you say, I love you too. But what am I supposed to do in this relationship? You're my friend, you're my mom, you're my dad, you're my romantic lover. You're like everything. How could you be a complete Costco to me? I demand too much from you. And you can't do all of those things. It's impossible. And again, you know, it's, besides making it political and sociological, just human nature makes it very complicated. And the truth is, different people have different qualities that are attractive. Have you never read Genesis? So you're talking about the Garden of Eden. It's a beautiful place. No pain. No one has been expelled. There's no Trump. No one. Everything's good. You don't have to work for food. You know, you just say, God, I'm hungry. Food comes. God, I'm lonely. God comes and gives you a hug. That's what the Garden of Eden is. And God does something really strange to these folks, Adam and Eve. He says, listen, go anywhere, do whatever. That tree over there, don't go near it. And you would think that Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden are satisfied, complete, whole. They have no desire except to be with God. But no, they're tempted by a tree. We are born to be tempted. And we are born to fall from grace. You will disappoint your parents, even though they love you. Your parents are born to disappoint you. That's what we do in life. We have no choice but to disappoint. Now, you may like me, but then you take another philosophy class. And you say, man, that guy really sucked. I'm the cause of your disappointment. That's how things are. You also spend too much time with your companion. Talk all the time, text all the time. Jesus Christ. It's too much. I mean, how many slices of Zachary's deep dish can you eat without puking? 1, 2, 3? When you eat your companion emotionally, physically, intellectually, every goddamn day, what the hell do you expect? I came to this class in a good mood. Now I'm upset.
Only have yourself to blame.
Anyone else? Quinn? I'm sorry, not Quinn, Q.
Zachary's your favorite pizza?
Say again?
Zachary's your favorite pizza?
You know, there are days I yearn for veggie gourmet round table, but I can no longer have those things. These days I just walk Zachary's shop, I look at the pizza, sniff it a little like a dog, and then walk away. It's bad for my heart. Arid. Religions?
No, in the relationships, how much you pay and
How much you pay and how much you get. Well, relationships in different cultures differ. So let me give it to you in this way. If, for example, and this is something that used to take place maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It's no longer as dominant. Let's say you came to class and there was a girl sitting over there, and assuming you're a hetero, you say you liked her. And you came to me after class and you said, Amir, I'm sorry, this is a weird question, but that girl over there, what's her name? Julie. What's her last name? Julia. You know, like Julia Gulia, the wedding planner. Say, okay. And then as you go out, you sit on the chair over there and you Google Julia Gulia in Oakland. And you realize where she lives. Then you go to your mom and say, Mom, there's this girl, Julia Gulia. Can you maybe just walk over there and knock on the door and see if she's available? So your mom goes over there, knocks on the door, the parents open the door and say, who are you? What do you want? And my son is in the same class as your daughter, Julia. He says that he likes her. Do you think we can hook him up? Now, one of the nice things about your parents looking for someone for you is that your parents have been around the block a few times. You know, that they know that, yeah, sex is wonderful, it's great, but there comes a point where it takes the back seat. Looks, also very important, but after a while you wouldn't care. You want to know whether this person has any longevity. You know, you can either buy a $20,000 car with a bad engine, or you could buy a $20,000 car with a good engine but looks bad. Now, if you ever happen to be a young punk, you would probably buy a $20,000 car with a bum engine, but it looks good. If you happen to be really smart and your money has blood in it, sweat in it, you say, fuck the looks. I'm going to buy a car that has a reliable engine. And that's how things used to be. Okay? Now, oftentimes what would happen is it would take you about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years to get to know your companion, and then to like him, and then hopefully to love him. But by then you would have kids, all those things. Here, now, the story is very different. It's an entertainment culture that hollows people from within, hollows them, like takes all the good stuff, trashes them, and replaces them with junk. Okay? They go out there and they fall in love at the age of 17. Jesus Christ, 17? What tools do you got? Nothing. How do you protect it? Sex, drugs, alcohol, porn, movies. I mean, these are not long-lasting things, and things fall apart. I don't think any woman should go out with any guy their own age. I mean, especially in their 20s or 30s. You need a guy who's at least 20 years older. At least. This day and age, maybe 40 years older. Any one else before we, Rose? Yeah.
So you said you were married before and that was not the same thing, but after kids first visited, watching your parents go through like
Okay. Couple of things. I've only been married once. Okay. Sure. It's a great question. So, imagine that you're my daughter and you're 21, let's just say. And Kendra happens to be my wife. Okay. Even the once in a while you see disagreements and chaos, but for the most part we put on a really, really good show. Unless we're just poisonous and toxic, that's a different story. And we wait and wait and wait until you reach a certain age. And then we come to you and say, Rose, honey, listen, we have some news. It's not the happiest one, but I think it's the best. Your mom and I are going to separate. Now, you're 19. You go to school, you have your own friends, you have your own bank account, you have your own life. And though the news devastates you, saddens you, depresses you for a while, you have a life that protects you. Okay? The flip side is the following. Kendra and I are your parents, but you're not 20. You're like 1 year old, maybe 2 years old. You're like this concrete, it's wet. You haven't yet formed, you haven't yet hardened. If I remove the forms, if a cat steps on it, everything will be destroyed. From the age 0 to almost the age like 12, you're soft. Everything around you that happens will impact you, either negatively or positively. What is it that any kid from 0 to 12 demand? You want stability, you want security. You want to know that when you come home, I will run to you, hug you and kiss you. And when you cry, I will run towards you. When you say, Dad, frozen yogurt, I say yes. When you say bicycle, I say yes. From 0 to about 12, you need to have the safest of physical, emotional environments. Any cracks is going to stay with you for the rest of your life. Now, if Kendra and I want a divorce, the question is, are you 1? Are you 2? Are you from 0 to 11? Or are you after that? If we are conscientious parents, if I know a thing or two about child rearing and raising, if Kendra and I are mature enough, and that's the tough part, because when you're upset, maturity goes out the window. You want to strangle your companion. If we have the maturity, we say, Kendra, listen, I know we have our differences. Rose, I love her as well. Let's protect her. Let's fake it for the next few years. Let's be an Al Pacino and Michelle Pfeiffer. When she gets to a certain age, then we'll break the news to her. But until then, keep her safe. Now, it could also be possible that her and I will divorce while you're 2 or 3 or 4. But we co-parent in a beautiful way. So, does it impact kids? Absolutely. It's a kind of, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he's a French philosopher. The first criminals in any kid's life are the parents. And these days you could say, parents who just divorce after 2-3 years, who have kids. So yeah, does it impact the kids? Absolutely. In a negative way? Definitely. Is it possible to fix? Yes. It's fixable. But to fix anything, you need to be interested and take care. Yes. You have a class you need to go? Yes, of course. Well, have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.